December 31st, 2003, a European tour bus was making its way across the continent when it arrived at what appeared to be nothing more than a routine government checkpoint. For the passengers on board, it was just another stop, but for one man, it would become the beginning of a nightmare that defied logic. Among the travelers was a Lebanese-German citizen who made his living selling used cars. He had joined the trip for a simple reason. He wanted a break, a few days away from everyday stress. Nothing more. The bus sat at the checkpoint for around 10 minutes. Then, everything changed. Officials suddenly called his name. They ordered him off the bus. The moment he stepped outside, the atmosphere shifted completely. The friendly routine vanished. The questions stopped. The explanations never came. Instead, they handcuffed him. A bag was pulled over his head, and right there in front of the other passengers, they began beating him. What made the situation even more shocking was who was doing it. This wasn't a criminal gang. These weren't mercenaries. This was an official government checkpoint, a legitimate border crossing, and yet nobody explained what was happening. But the real shock was still to come. 5 days later, the blindfold was finally removed. And when he learned where he was, his world collapsed. Without warning, without charges, without any understanding of how it had happened, he had been transported all the way to Afghanistan. And that man is the subject of today's story. A story filled with torture, strange events, unanswered questions, and decisions so unbelievable that they sound fictional. Who was the criminal? What was the accusation? Who exactly was arresting him, and why? Every detail we're about to uncover feels impossible, but the most shocking part isn't what happened, it's the reason it happened. When you hear it, you'll probably have the same reaction everyone else does. No way. There is absolutely no way this can be real. And yet, unfortunately, it is. Before we get into the story, if you're new here, welcome to KEROLAD, the channel where we explore some of the strangest, darkest, and most mysterious stories on Earth. Now, to understand how this nightmare began, you need to understand the man at the center of it, because there was nothing remarkable about him, nothing suspicious, nothing that would make him stand out in a crowd. He wasn't hiding from anyone. He wasn't on the run. He wasn't living under a false identity. He was just an ordinary man. So ordinary, in fact, that if you passed him on the street, you probably wouldn't look twice. He was 41 years old. He lived in a quiet German city. His job was selling used cars. His life followed the same routine every day. Work, home, family. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. And that's exactly why these details matter, because it's important to understand that there was no obvious reason for what was about to happen. A few days before the trip, he and his wife had gotten into an argument. The reason? Bills, rent, the pressure of everyday life, the kind of disagreement millions of couples have. There was nothing extraordinary about it, certainly nothing that could possibly explain the events you're about to hear. Needing a break from the stress, he decided to get away for a few days. 5 days, maybe less, maybe more. Just enough time to clear his head. He found a cheap ticket and headed for Macedonia. A simple vacation, nothing complicated. He packed only one small bag. Inside were 2 sets of clothes and his German passport. In his pocket, he carried 563 euros. That was it. Looking at the photo in his passport, one thing was obvious. His appearance was distinctly Middle Eastern. He had been born in Lebanon, but had lived in Germany since the mid-1980s. He attended Friday prayers at a mosque near his home. He was a husband, a father, a car salesman, an ordinary man. But at some point, those simple facts would become the very things that failed to protect him. At 3:10 in the morning, he arrived at the Macedonian border. Everything seemed normal, a routine checkpoint, nothing unusual. The officer sat in front of a computer, checking passports and passenger information one by one. Then he entered the man's name, and something happened. For the first time, a strange alert appeared on the screen, a warning signal, bright red. The officer recognized the alert immediately. He had heard about it before. He knew that on rare occasions it could appear, but during his 2 years of service, he had never actually seen it happen until now. And from that moment forward, a chain of events was set in motion. No one asked questions. No one demanded proof. No one stopped to verify whether there had been a mistake. The computer had spoken, and that was enough. The alert was so rare that its appearance alone changed everything. They pulled him off the bus. The treatment became brutal. He was beaten, handled aggressively, humiliated, and through all of it, he kept asking the same question over and over again. What is happening? Why are you doing this? But nobody answered. Nobody explained anything. And now, there's a question I want you to think about. Do you believe the argument he had with his wife just days earlier has anything to do with what happened next? Because as strange as this story already sounds, we're only getting started.
They dragged him deeper inside the building and sat him down in a small interrogation room. No windows, no clock, just a single white light hanging directly above his head. The kind of light that seemed designed to make people uncomfortable, as if the room itself had been built specifically for moments like this. For the next 3 hours, the same questions were asked over and over again. Every so often, they would remove the hood from his head, strike him, and then continue the interrogation as if nothing had happened. But what made the situation even stranger was the nature of the questions. Where were you in this year? Why did you travel here? Who paid for your trip? The questions sounded disconnected, almost random. Terrified and confused, he answered everything, sometimes in broken English, sometimes in German when panic took over. But no matter what he said, it didn't seem to matter. No notes were taken, no statements were recorded. Nothing he said appeared to count. This continued until 6:30 in the morning, and then, suddenly, it was over. At least, that's what he thought. But the interrogation wasn't what had ended. His normal life had. They tied him up, photographed him naked, documented the bruises covering his body. Then, they loaded him into an unmarked van and drove him down roads he had never seen before.
Eventually, they arrived at an old hotel on the edge of the city, and the place looked wrong, very wrong. The building was made of reinforced concrete, 3 stories tall, surrounded by armored vehicles. From the outside, it carried the name of a hotel, but inside, it felt like something entirely different. They took him to room 13, and that room was no ordinary hotel room. The door was made of heavy steel. There was only one window. It was reinforced, and it couldn't be opened. According to him, the room seemed almost completely soundproof, or perhaps the entire floor had been emptied. Either way, the silence was unnatural. The room had no telephone, no television, no way to communicate with the outside world. The guards changed every 8 hours. The faces were different, but everything else remained exactly the same. The same silence, the same cold stares, the same treatment. At this point, one question becomes impossible to ignore. Who were these people, and what could this man possibly have done to deserve this? Trust me, the answer is far stranger than you think. The individuals guarding him weren't police officers. They weren't military personnel. Technically, they appeared to be hotel employees, ordinary staff members, yet none of them would speak to him. Not a single word, not once. Even their hand gestures were difficult to understand. The only things he eventually learned were simple commands: open, close, stand, sit. Meals arrived twice a day, usually just bread and cheese. Bathroom access was limited to once per day, and even that happened under strict supervision. No lawyer, no phone call, no explanation, not even a single sentence telling him why he was being held there.
Then, on the 3rd day, everything changed. The atmosphere shifted. The familiar faces disappeared, and the silence he had grown used to suddenly ended. Now he was being interrogated every 4 hours. 3 investigators conducted the questioning. They spoke English, but their accents sounded unusual. Then came the first truly shocking moment. These men knew everything, and not just a few details, everything. They told him where he had worked between 1985 and 1993. They named the automobile company. They knew his wife's name was Aisha. They knew the exact year they were married, 1996. They knew the names of all 6 of his children, every single one. At that moment, his mind began racing. How could they possibly know all of this? For the first time, whether he was guilty or innocent stopped mattering. A much more frightening thought took its place. Had someone been watching him all these years?
Keep that question in mind. The answer is coming. During one of the interrogations, they placed photographs in front of him. One was his passport photo. Beside it was a blurry image of another man. Then they calmly told him, "We're sending you back to the country you came from." Naturally, he assumed they meant Germany. Anyone would. But that wasn't what they meant. Not even close. At first, he felt relieved. He believed the nightmare was finally ending. He had no idea the real story hadn't even begun yet. On January 12, 2004, paperwork was signed authorizing his transfer to another country. Yet, despite that decision, he remained isolated, completely cut off from the world for 23 days. Think about that. 23 days, alone, under constant camera surveillance. The doors opened only when he was taken to the bathroom. Food arrived through a small slot beneath the door. He never saw the person who delivered it, never exchanged a single word.
Then, on the 23rd day, new people entered the room. These men were different. Different clothes, different behavior, different presence. They wore black suits. They weren't the investigators, and they weren't the hotel employees who had been guarding him. After 23 days of isolation, a completely new group had suddenly appeared. They handed back his passport, his wallet, his money, every euro. Even his wedding ring was returned. Then they said only one sentence: "Get ready, you're going home." Moments later, they injected him twice in the front of his leg. Within minutes, he lost consciousness. From that point on, everything became a blur. The men loaded him into a van and drove through the streets of Macedonia. Around 2 a.m., they arrived at an airport. He was transferred onto a large cargo aircraft. Sometime later, he woke up inside the plane. One of the men looked at him and said, "Congratulations, in a few hours, you'll be home." Then he paused and added one final sentence. "But first, there's something we have to do. Those are our instructions." And what happened next would become one of the most disturbing parts of this entire story. Without warning, 7 men entered the aircraft. What happened next made even less sense than everything that had come before. They began beating him. Then they stripped off all of his clothes. One of the men leaned toward him and said something he would never forget. "This is the punishment for a man who prays at the mosque every day." The sentence sounded absurd, completely disconnected from reality. Before he could even process what it meant, they injected him again, another sedative, and once more, everything went black. At this point, the story probably feels chaotic. The events seem disconnected, almost impossible to follow, but let's pause for a second and look at what has happened so far. This was a Lebanese-German man. He had argued with his wife, booked a 5-day vacation, arrived at the Macedonian border, been detained after a routine passport check, beaten in front of other travelers, held inside a mysterious hotel for 23 days, interrogated by people who somehow knew every detail of his life, told he was finally going home, drugged, transported to an airport, loaded onto a cargo aircraft, awakened in midair, beaten again, and throughout all of this, nobody had given him a single clear explanation. Why was any of this happening? Who was behind it? And why had someone told him he was being punished simply for attending a mosque? None of it made sense. Not yet. There was another question that bothered him. If he was truly being sent home, why wasn't he on a normal passenger flight? Why was he lying on the floor of a cargo aircraft? Why was he restrained? Wasn't this supposed to be the end? The aircraft remained on the ground for nearly 8 hours. Then, at around noon, it finally took off. 8 hours later, at exactly 8:46 p.m., it landed in a new country, and that was when things became even darker. A man approached him, a man he had never met before. This time, the stranger spoke Arabic, calmly, clearly, and the words he said sent a chill through him. "You belong to us now. We can do whatever we want with you, and believe me, nobody will ever know what happened to you." Then, the man pulled the hood back over his head and left him tied up exactly where he was. About an hour later, several English-speaking men arrived. Without removing the restraints, they picked him up and transported him to another location. During the journey, he managed to glance beneath the edge of the hood. Just for a moment, what he saw was unexpected. Snow, mountains covered in snow,
Immediately, he started trying to make sense of the situation. Someone had spoken to him in Arabic. Now he was surrounded by snowy mountains. His first assumption was simple. Maybe he had been taken back to Lebanon. At that point, he was desperately searching for any explanation. Eventually, they pulled him from the vehicle, dragged him forward, and threw him into an enclosed space. A massive metal door slammed shut behind him. Even without seeing it, he could tell how enormous it was from the sound alone. The impact echoed through the walls, heavy, violent, final. About an hour later, several men entered. They removed the hood and marched him outside. For the first time, he managed to see a little of his surroundings. The place looked abandoned, ruined. From what he could tell, it resembled an old factory. Then they led him underground, 1 floor, 2 floors, 3 floors below the surface. Finally, they brought him into a room carved directly into the earth, and once the door closed behind him, he lost all sense of time. Inside that room, it was impossible to tell day from night, hours from days, days from weeks. Then they left him there, alone. No explanations, no conversations, nothing. For 25 days. 25 days without knowing why he was there. 25 days without understanding who had taken him. 25 days without seeing a single person willing to answer even one question. Each day, food and a bottle of water appeared beneath the door, and that was the only proof that another human being existed nearby. What many people don't realize is that uncertainty itself can become a form of torture.
In some cases, one of the most powerful forms. The less a prisoner knows, the more effective the system becomes. Don't tell him who arrested him. Don't tell him what the charges are. Don't tell him where he is. Don't tell him whether he's facing prison, freedom, or death. Keep everything hidden, because confusion breaks people. And according to him, every detail of this place seemed designed with that exact purpose in mind. The dim lighting, the cold temperature, the complete isolation, the inability to track time, the silence, even the chain attached to his ankle. Technically, it didn't stop him from moving around the cell, but that wasn't its purpose. Its purpose was psychological. It constantly reminded him that he wasn't free. And after 25 days, freedom itself began to feel unreal, like something that existed only in memory. Add to that the isolation, the endless self-questioning, the feeling of being completely forgotten, and the result was exactly what the designers intended: to slowly destroy every psychological defense a prisoner had left. Because once a person reaches that point, interrogation becomes much easier. People start confessing to things they never did, not because they are guilty, but because they become willing to say anything to make the suffering stop, even if the outcome is worse, even if it means spending the rest of their lives in prison, even if it means death. Then, after 25 days, the interrogators returned. This time, the interrogation lasted 12 straight hours. No breaks, no mercy. The interrogations switched constantly between Arabic, English, and German. The tone was aggressive, the pace was relentless, and the questions made almost no sense. Where did you receive your training? Who sent you? What was your mission? For 4 straight hours in Arabic alone, those same 3 questions were repeated again and again.
Then the language changed to German, and the first German question caught him completely off guard. Why did you travel to the mountains of Afghanistan in the year 2000? He stared at the interrogator in disbelief. What are you talking about? I've never been to Afghanistan. I don't even know where it is on a map. The interrogator immediately called him a liar. Then he began placing documents in front of him, receipts, records, statements from people who supposedly dealt with him in Afghanistan during that exact period. The evidence looked convincing, terrifyingly convincing. In fact, it was presented so confidently and in such overwhelming volume that for a brief moment, even he began questioning his own memory. For a second, it almost felt as if they had somehow proven that he really had been in Afghanistan in the year 2000.
The English language interrogation continued for another 3 hours, and just like before, every question led back to the same place: Afghanistan, Afghanistan, Afghanistan. Then the interrogators left. A few minutes later, 2 German-speaking men entered the room. At first, he thought another interrogation was about to begin. It wasn't. One of them looked directly at him and said, "We're not here to question you." Then he held up a metal chain. "I'm going to hit you with this chain. You will count every strike. If you lose count, we start over. There will be 27 strikes. Don't make a mistake." At this point, nothing made any sense anymore. What was this place? Who were these people? And what could this man possibly have done to deserve treatment like this? For the next 3 hours, they beat him relentlessly, again and again. Every time he lost count because of the pain, they started over from the beginning. 1, 2, 3, back to 1, again and again. And again, the pain became so overwhelming that eventually he broke. At one point, he shouted, "Fine, I was in Afghanistan. I'll sign anything you want. I'll confess to whatever you want me to confess to. Just stop hitting me." The response he received was chilling. The man holding the chain simply shrugged. "That has nothing to do with me. I'm not the one questioning you. My job is just to hit you, and our job together is to count to 27. That answer revealed something terrifying. This wasn't random cruelty. It was a system. Every person had a role. Every action had a purpose. Every detail was planned. The next day brought a different kind of torture. Loud music, the same song, over and over, endlessly. A mix of screaming, harsh noise, and aggressive sounds. For an entire day, the song played without stopping.
Then, they introduced another routine. Every 2 hours, the music would stop for 15 minutes. Just enough time for him to begin falling asleep, and then it would start again, over and over and over. Sleep became impossible. Reality itself began to blur. Weeks of exhaustion slowly stripped away his ability to think clearly. Then, sometime in February, a new face appeared, and unlike everyone else, this man was kind, incredibly kind. He spoke softly, he listened, he treated him like a human being. After everything he had endured, the contrast was overwhelming. Whenever he saw this man, he would break down in tears. Sometimes he would even kiss his hands in gratitude. That was exactly the reaction they wanted. Because this wasn't kindness, it was another technique, another calculated move. The man spoke fluent German. He knew exactly how to build trust. He spoke about childhood memories, about growing up in Kuwait. He mentioned his parents by name. He talked about the schools he had attended. The conversations felt natural, almost friendly. For an entire week, the man visited regularly. They talked, shared meals, spent hours together. Everyone else had tortured him. This man offered comfort, and that made him seem trustworthy. Then, on the final day, the man sat down across from him and said something unexpected. "We know you're not the person we're looking for." For a moment, he thought he had misheard him. The man continued, "Unfortunately, your presence here has created a problem, so you'll need to stay with us a little longer until we can reach an agreement." Then he leaned forward. "Help me solve this. I'll do everything I can to fix the situation." The prisoner immediately asked the question he had wanted answered for months. "Who are you people?" The man smiled. "I can't tell you. What's really going on? You'll understand later." Then came the offer. "When this is over, everything that happened here must remain secret. You'll sign documents. You won't tell anyone where you've been. You won't discuss what happened. And then you'll go home." At that point, he didn't care anymore. He would have agreed to almost anything. "Fine, I'll do whatever you want. Just get me out of here." That conversation took place on February 20th.
And then the man vanished completely. No visits, no messages, no updates, nothing. One day passed, then another, then a week, then 6 weeks. It was as if the man had never existed. By March, reality itself felt distant. His body had deteriorated dramatically. He was little more than skin and bones. His teeth had started falling out. His hair was coming out in clumps. Not because of disease, because of what the experience was doing to him. Then they transferred him to another cell, and things became even worse. From there, he could hear other prisoners, people screaming, voices speaking languages he didn't recognize. Somewhere nearby, another prisoner was being held. He never saw him, only heard him. At first, it was just a sound, a dull impact, then another.
and another, a head striking concrete, once, twice, 10 times. The impacts continued for hours, then suddenly, silence. The next day, he learned that the prisoner had ended his own life. The body disappeared. The guards carried on as if nothing unusual had happened, and that was perhaps the most disturbing part, because in this place, death wasn't a major event. It wasn't shocking. It wasn't rare. Sometimes it was simply another way out, another form of escape. But he refused to give up. His faith wouldn't allow it. He told himself, "I'll endure. I'll wait. I need to know how this ends." Then, on March 11th, he made a decision. He stopped eating. If they weren't going to release him, he would let starvation end what they had started. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3.
6 days passed. On the 7th day, they realized he wasn't eating. The door burst open. 4 people wearing medical clothing entered. They restrained him, held him down, and forced a tube through his nose. The pain was unbearable, far worse than he expected. It felt like a burning rod traveling down his throat and into his stomach. But the real shock came moments later. They weren't going to let him die. They force-fed him, injected nutritional fluids into his body, and they repeated the process every day, 3 times a day, for 37 consecutive days. Then came day 104, and suddenly a familiar face returned, the man everyone referred to as the boss. The moment he saw him, hope flooded back into his mind. Maybe this nightmare was finally ending. The man sat down calmly. His voice was gentle, polite, controlled.
And then, he said, the decision has finally been made. For a split second, only one possibility entered his mind: execution. Because in a place like this, that felt like the most logical ending. But that wasn't what the man said. Instead, he looked at him and replied, "We can send you back, if you're willing to cooperate." The condition sounded simple: complete silence. No interviews, no lawsuits, no complaints, no discussions, no mention of any location, no mention of any names, no mention of anything that had happened, ever. Then, they placed 8 pages of official documents in front of him, all written in English. He couldn't properly read them. The boss pointed to the signature line: "Sign, and you may see Germany again." Without hesitation, he signed every page, every document. But as he did, something caught his attention. At the top of the papers was a logo he immediately recognized, a logo known all over the world. And in that moment, a terrifying realization hit him. Could it really be them? Could they have been behind everything from the very beginning?
He signed the papers, not because he believed them, not because he trusted them, but because he no longer had another choice. And then something happened that seemed impossible. The conditions inside his cell changed completely, almost overnight. It was as if someone had decided to bring him back to life after spending months trying to break him. He was moved to a different room. This one had a window, a real bed, a private bathroom, proper meals, vitamins, a television so he could watch the news, soap, clean clothes. They cut his hair. They replaced everything he had been wearing. This wasn't recovery, it was reconstruction. Piece by piece, they were rebuilding the man they had nearly destroyed. His skin slowly regained its color. His strength began to return. His body started looking human again. Then, on May 28, 2004, the cell door opened one final time. For the first time, there was no shouting, no violence, no restraints, no threats. But the nightmare wasn't over. It had simply changed direction. They escorted him out of the facility, and for the first time in months, he felt fresh air.
Real air, not recycled air trapped behind concrete walls. He looked up and saw the sky. He heard ordinary sounds, cars passing by, people talking. The world still existed. After months of isolation, even those simple things felt unreal. Then they placed him on a small aircraft. Nobody explained anything. Nobody spoke to him. The plane took off and eventually landed in another country. This happened on May 29, 2004, early in the morning. When they landed, officials told him, "We'll stop here briefly to complete the release procedures." He immediately asked, "Where am I?" We'll explain shortly. They transferred him to a government office. Then someone finally gave him information. Sending you directly to Germany would be difficult. Immigration authorities would have too many questions about where you've been. The answer that followed stunned him. He asked, "Where was I?" The official replied, "Afghanistan." He froze. "Excuse me? Afghanistan?" "Yes." Then he asked the obvious question. "If I was in Afghanistan, where are we now?" The answer was equally unexpected. Albania. According to the officials, he would sign a few documents, complete some formalities, and then quietly return home, as if he had simply been on an ordinary trip. They coached him on what to say, what not to say, how to explain his absence, how to answer questions. The entire story had already been prepared for him. And according to him, Albania had been chosen for a reason. It was a convenient place to move him through without attracting attention. Once the paperwork was complete, they placed him inside a vehicle. For 3 hours they drove north. Empty roads, tall mountains, tiny villages. Then the car stopped beside a dirt road near a village called Kult. There were no houses nearby, no people, no movement.
Then, out of nowhere, the boss appeared one last time. The same man who had spent weeks earning his trust. The same man who had promised to solve everything. He stepped forward and shook his hand. Then he handed him 14,000 euros, returned his German passport, and gave him a white t-shirt with the words Munich 2003 printed on it. Then he said only one thing. "Put this shirt on. Walk straight down this road. Don't turn around, don't look back, just keep walking." That was it. The man got back into the vehicle and drove away. At approximately 8:17 in the morning, he found himself standing alone on a dirt road. No guards, no prison, no explanations, nothing. He walked and walked and walked for nearly 3 hours. Then, suddenly, a bus appeared, a completely ordinary bus, filled with ordinary passengers. It stopped beside him. He got on, and for the first time in months, he was sitting among normal people. The bus eventually reached the Albanian border. One of the passengers pointed toward the border officials and told him, "Go speak with them. They'll help you." He approached the officers.
And at that moment, everything he had been holding inside finally broke. He burst into tears. Standing there was a German citizen carrying a German passport, 14,000 euros in cash, and a story so unbelievable that it sounded insane. He told them he had been kidnapped, imprisoned, and abandoned on a roadside. The officials immediately contacted the German embassy. The response was surprising. Yes, this man had officially been reported missing, but nobody had any explanation for where he had been or how he had suddenly appeared in Albania. Later that same day, May 29, 2004, he boarded a flight to Frankfurt. There were 93 passengers on board. As the aircraft prepared to land, something unexpected happened. He began crying, then pleading, then panicking. He begged the flight attendants not to let him get off the plane. After everything he had been through, he was terrified that the moment his feet touched the ground, someone would take him again. The fear had become permanent. But this time, something different happened. The plane landed, and nobody came for him. At Frankfurt Airport, the entire immigration process lasted only 4 minutes. One officer looked at him and asked a simple question, "Mr. El Masri, where have you been since January?" The officer's computer showed nothing. No departure record, no arrival record, no trace of his journey. It was as if he had never left Germany, as if none of the previous months had ever happened. For a moment, he simply stared. Then he answered, "Afghanistan." The officer looked at him and casually asked, "Business or vacation?" At that point, he completely broke down. The months of fear, the torture, the isolation, the uncertainty, everything finally caught up with him. Through tears, he managed to answer, "Visiting friends."
A few routine procedures followed. Then, his passport was stamped, the gate opened, and just like that, he was a normal citizen again. Or at least, that's what everyone else believed. He boarded a train, a journey lasting 3 hours and 14 minutes, and finally returned home. But another shock was waiting for him. He walked to his front door, knocked, No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. Eventually, he used his key and stepped inside. The house was empty. Completely empty. Not just deserted. Empty. The furniture was gone. The belongings were gone. Everything was gone. Then he found a note, a message from his wife. It contained a single sentence. I waited, but I couldn't wait any longer. Years later, he would say that those words hurt more than every day he spent in captivity. The people closest to him had moved on. His family believed he was gone, and they had been forced to continue living without him. After searching for answers, he discovered what had happened. His wife and children had returned to Lebanon 6 weeks earlier. The landlord had evicted them. 5 months of rent had gone unpaid. His job had disappeared after only 3 weeks of absence. When he tried to challenge the decision legally, authorities gave a simple explanation. Most missing adults, they said, leave voluntarily. From their perspective, he had abandoned his family, disappeared, and never come back. So the eviction, the lost job, the financial disaster, all of it had happened while he was trapped somewhere he wasn't even allowed to talk about. And the most painful question followed him everywhere. Why did you disappear? People asked it constantly. Friends, officials, employers, neighbors. But he couldn't answer because the agreement he had signed prohibited him from speaking about what had happened. For an entire month after returning home, he slept in parks and public spaces. Then came the bills, taxes, penalties, outstanding debts, a total of 23,000 euros. Even the 14,000 euros they had given him before releasing him wasn't enough to repair the damage. And the worst part, the real explanation for everything had still not been revealed.
Eventually, with the help of a charitable organization, Khalid El-Masri managed to contact his wife in Lebanon. When she answered the phone, her first question was simple: "Where have you been?" There was a long pause. Then Khalid replied, "I can't explain over the phone. When you come back, I'll tell you everything. Please, just come back." His wife listened, then quietly said, "I'll think about it," and hung up. After everything he had endured, he still couldn't tell anyone what happened to him. Not his friends, not his neighbors, not even the people closest to him. He couldn't explain who had taken him, he couldn't explain where he had been, and he certainly couldn't explain why. 2 weeks later, they met at Frankfurt Airport. The reunion wasn't what he had imagined. When his wife first saw him, she didn't recognize him. Months of imprisonment, torture, starvation, and psychological abuse had transformed him completely. Even his children were frightened. They hesitated to approach him. Some didn't even want to hug him. They all asked the same question: "Where were you?" And once again, he had no answer he could give. All he could do was promise them that everything happened beyond his control. Eventually, he told his wife the full story. Only her, and only because he believed it would remain a secret between them. But that secret didn't stay hidden long, and that is the moment this case exploded onto the world stage.
On May 31st, 2005, without Khalid's knowledge, his wife revealed the story to journalists. What followed became one of the most shocking reports of forced disappearance in modern history. The report described a vast network of secret detentions and covert transfers. In paragraph 14, investigators mentioned a German citizen identified only as X. According to the report, he had been mistakenly abducted, transported to a distant country, imprisoned, and later released. His name wasn't published. The source was protected, but the details were unmistakable, and they were enough. The report triggered immediate outrage. News organizations across the world demanded investigations. Governments were pressured to respond. Questions that had remained buried for years suddenly became impossible to ignore. Ironically, Khalid had hired a lawyer specifically to keep his identity hidden. He knew that if his name became public, his life would become even more complicated. But by then, the story had become too large. It was no longer a private tragedy. It had become a public scandal. Soon, the entire truth began emerging piece by piece. German federal investigators contacted Khalid. A confidential investigation was opened. Officials told him something important. "You aren't speaking out for revenge. You're speaking out so this never happens to anyone else." And as investigators dug deeper, a disturbing pattern emerged. Within the European Union alone, more than 450 cases involving disappeared naturalized Arab citizens had been documented. Then, in late 2005, a documentary exposed even more details. And finally, the organization behind Khalid's disappearance was identified. According to the investigation, the operation had been carried out by the CIA. The justification? National security. As prosecutors followed flight records, hotel receipts, aircraft registrations, telephone records, and internal documents, they gradually reconstructed the entire chain of events. Eventually, investigators identified 13 individuals operating under aliases. The answer turned out to be astonishingly simple: a case of mistaken identity. For years, a special intelligence unit had been investigating individuals connected to the aftermath of the September 11th attacks.
When Macedonian border officers entered Khalid's name into their system, a name match triggered an alert. The problem was that the match wasn't Khalid. It was someone else, someone under suspicion. And that single mistake changed everything. Because once the alert appeared, the process began. Automatically, he was detained, beaten, interrogated, and handed over before anyone bothered to verify who he actually was. According to later investigations, the hotel in Macedonia had been part of the operation. The plan was to build a case against him, then transfer him to a secret interrogation facility in Afghanistan. The evidence uncovered later suggested something even more disturbing. From the very beginning, investigators already knew he was innocent, but by then, releasing him created a problem. And so the process continued. Psychologists who reviewed the case later argued that the methods used against Khalid weren't simply designed to obtain information, they were designed to destroy identity, to erase a person's existing sense of self and replace it with a new one. The goal, according to those assessments, was to push him toward a point where he would genuinely believe he was guilty, a point where he would confess not because he was lying, but because he had been psychologically reconstructed. In that state, even a lie detector would show no deception, because he would truly believe the story being fed to him. Investigators examining other detainees reached similarly troubling conclusions. Several people who confessed to serious crimes later claimed they had been broken down psychologically until they no longer trusted their own memories. The broader objective, critics argued, was simple: close cases, produce suspects, show results, convince the public that the perpetrators had been found. Whether those confessions were true became a secondary question. Years later, the legal system finally responded.
On December 13, 2012, the European Court issued a landmark ruling. The court unanimously concluded that what happened to Khaled constituted torture and a severe violation of human rights. Compensation was ordered, not from the United States, but from Macedonia, the country that had initially detained and transferred him. Khaled was awarded $350,000 in damages, along with compensation related to his treatment and recovery. As for the United States, officials maintained that the individuals involved had exceeded their authority and acted improperly. According to public statements, those responsible were removed from their positions and investigated. But for Khaled, none of that changed what had happened. And perhaps the most disturbing revelation was this: he wasn't the only one. Investigators uncovered hundreds of cases involving people who disappeared under similar circumstances. Many had one thing in common: their backgrounds, their names, their origins. As for the man Khaled had supposedly been confused with, reports indicated his name was Abdullah, a fact that only deepened the absurdity of the entire story, because somehow a mistake so catastrophic had been allowed to destroy an innocent man's life. Then came Khaled's final televised interview. In 2015, he was asked what the experience had taken from him. His answer was devastating. He said, "They didn't take 5 months from my life. They took my entire life. Even now, I'm still inside that cell. Every day I see it in my dreams. It became part of me."
Those were among the last public words he spoke about the ordeal. And maybe that's the most disturbing part of this entire story. Not the prison, not the interrogations, not the flights, not even the torture. It's the fact that a single error was enough to erase a man's world. A vacation became a disappearance, a name became evidence, and innocence became irrelevant. Because sometimes, in systems built on fear, the question isn't whether you're guilty. The question is how much you're capable of enduring before the system decides otherwise.
If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, consider subscribing. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.